let's kind of set this up. Maybe pull the graph down for just a second, Logan.
All right.
So let's kind of set this up. So we're in the middle of a reconciliation bill situation. Remember, the budget committee passed the ground rules for reconciliation a few weeks ago. And now the House is spending a lot of time going through all their various budget things. One key factor in this is the argument over extending and continuing the Trump tax cuts, which went into effect in 2018. And that what's happening is, and listen, the Congressional Budget Office does this all the time. The Senate parliamentarian and their folks do this too. They're scoring a continuation of the Trump tax cuts and adding the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. They're calling it about $1.1 trillion against spending over a 10-year period. But here's the problem. The Trump tax cuts are already in place. You don't score that, but they are. And this is one of the quirky, stupid things that happens in Washington, D.C. They hate tax cuts. They will not allow any tax cuts to be considered unless it gets scored against the, just scored against the budget that's being proposed. So now put the graph up. I want to show people, as you're looking through this and considering this situation, I just want to show you this. 2018 is when the Trump tax cuts went into effect. They were passed in 2017. And you can see from this graph, with the notable exception of COVID, that revenues skyrocketed. These tax cuts have been in place the entire time. But here's one thing that's very interesting. When you add taxes, so Congress, under Biden, implemented in 2022, December of 2022, a minimum 15% corporate tax on every firm that had $1 billion of revenue and more. And I'm not saying this drop in revenue is directly related to only this, but it is a factor. So the point that we're making here is that tax cuts do not harm spending. They tend to help it, particularly in a society that taxes any citizen over 10%. Just going to the tithe example here. Like we are getting our money confiscated all the time. And this is important because of the Laffer Curve. The Laffer Curve is Art Laffer's theory that when you cut taxes, you actually increase revenue. Now, there's a whole lot of details to how you evaluate the curve. At some point, you reduce taxes so much that actually you aren't gaining extra revenue. But obviously at zero, you're not gaining any extra revenue. So on the low end of the curve, you don't get as much. But when you are lowering taxes at the rates we're living at right now, you tend to get more revenue than you can even imagine. This has always been the case. It happened with the Reagan tax cuts. It happened with tax cuts that took place during the Clinton administration. There were some modest tax cuts that happened there. The Bush tax cuts, same thing. Revenues skyrocketed. So as you're listening to this debate, because the taxes are a big part of this issue, that's one thing to point out. We can talk about other aspects of this, but I just wanted to point that out. Do you see what I'm saying here, Brandon?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, we look at this whole thing wrong all the time. We allow the people in Washington, D.C. to lie and tell us something is that is not.
Well, and that's, of course, why groups like this network are growing. And again, today, this is what, the second or third time now? Caroline Leavitt has brought in the new media and given them a special briefing and let them ask questions in the, I don't know if that's the basement of the White House, but it was that soundstage they built for Biden.
I think in the OEOB, in the old executive office building.
Old executive office building. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And she's bringing them in to let them ask questions. She's done that again today. I saw Eric Bolling. Looked like Bo Loudon, Dr. Regina Loudon's son, and several others getting to ask her questions. So when this White House said that they were going to really kind of roll out the red carpet for the alternative media, they weren't bluffing. They really have done it. And I didn't know if this special briefing for the new media was a one-off, but now it's happened at least now a second or third time. So it seems to be They are really realizing the people are done with the mainstream media. And the reason the most of them are done is, well, you're giving a perfect example now, how the media lies to us about basic things like this. Did we just lose him? Is he frozen?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you were about to put something up. I apologize.
Oh, no, this, yeah. Meaning no, this chart.
Yeah, exactly. This said, listen, what Caroline Leavitt's doing, obviously at Trump's behest, is really radically transforming how we do things. Like, for example, I do not see graphs like this shown very often. Again, I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying the drop in revenue after the corporate minimum was directly related to that, but it is related to it in part. There are other factors too. We did have an economic downturn happening about that time. We had inflation going crazy. Inflation reduces, it doesn't reduce dollar spending, it reduces dollar power. And that has an effect on an economy. And the Trump tax cuts have not harmed us anywhere along the way. And I would argue, because they were going up not as precipitously prior to COVID, but when everyone could get back to work after COVID, and everyone did because they had to go make money, they didn't have the money coming from DC anymore, they produced like crazy, even in the headwinds, the massive headwinds that the Biden economy was putting upon them.
Indeed. All right. So what else has been going on in Washington today that you're covering? I mean, I guess I know one for sure, Logan. We covered it today at 1 o'clock for radio. Another great cabinet meeting with all of these reports by the various cabinet members. Did you get a chance to watch any of that?
I did not get a chance to watch it. I got totally caught up in stuff today.
Well, it was quite fascinating. And I think one of them was RFK Jr. I don't know. Do you have that one, Logan, where RFK Jr. is talking about the sex trafficking? All right, let's play a couple. We'll get the RFK Jr. one. Let's go with what you got, Logan.
Would be fine.
Mr. President, could I ask Secretary Rubio, could I ask you a question? You brought up El Salvador in your remarks. Have you been in touch with El Salvador about returning Abrego Garcia? Has a formal request from this administration been made?
Well, I would never tell you that. And you know who else I'll never tell? A judge. Because the conduct of our foreign policy belongs to the President of the United States and the executive branch, not some judge. So we will conduct foreign policy appropriately if we need to, but I'll never discuss it. And no one will ever make us discuss it because that's how foreign policy works.
Mr. President, could I ask Secretary...
Well, and there you go. He's like, I'm not going to discuss this with you, this fake news media, right? And I'm not going to discuss it with a judge. I mean, again, this judiciary is out of control.
Well, listen, what Rubio said there is fantastic, by the way. For a guy who, you know, you kind of like, but there are certain aspects of when he was a senator, it started to be bothersome for me in war and in supporting the Patriot Act. I had my concerns, but overall, he has some good qualities, and this is one of them. And he's being inspired by Donald Trump as well. He absolutely should have said this. So you've got a judicial system right now that is trying to put its stamp on executive power outside of its lane. Like, obviously, we need court systems in any country to try to adjudicate problems and fix problems. But we only should be doing that on discrete cases, not the broad way that judiciary is doing it right now. And Marco Rubio is absolutely correct. Article 1 power resides in the president. He's acting on the president's authority to do whatever they're deciding to do privately and to refuse to answer courts on foreign policy, which is absolutely outside the lane of the judicial branch. The judicial branch can only deal with cases at law here in this country. They don't have authority when it comes to our foreign policy. So, yeah, well done, Marco. He's absolutely right. I support it 100%.
Let's go to the next clip.
As the role, we have ended HHS as the role as the vector, the principal vector in this country for child trafficking. And during the Biden administration, HHS became a collaborator in child trafficking and for sex and for slavery. And we have ended that, and we're very aggressively going out and trying to find these children, the 300,000 children that were lost by the Biden administration.
And this is what HHS whistleblower Tara Rhoda has told me here many times. And now you have the HHS secretary backing it up and talking about it. Did you ever think you'd see this day? Because I sure didn't.
Oh, I have to say, and this is one of the worst aspects of our government gone wild. We have a massive government that's doing way too much and needs to get out of the hair of people. But when you consider that for the purposes of supporting mass immigration, that they have been facilitating child trafficking anywhere in our government, and I'll bet you HHS is not the only place, then the breathtaking absurdity of what the Biden administration was is an outrage. And I have to say, the lawlessness that we were subject to when it comes to censorship, when it comes to so many things that the Biden administration had done, massive regulations, we dodged a bullet getting Donald Trump elected. We defeated, at least for a short time, what really is a deep state type operation. And people hate that word and they can think it was overused. I don't, I always was cautious with it. I'm not cautious anymore. These are government actors who are deciding to do what they want to do against the will of the American people. They are acting as socialists, or were acting that way, destroying our country, telling or implementing policies that had nothing to do with the will of the American people outside the normal processes that are laid out in the Constitution. It is lawless. And I got to tell you, and just, back to the budget just real quick, Chip Roy had a post today saying, if we're not going to get rid of all of these Obama programs out of the budget, then what are we doing here? Like, that's a lay down. The Obama policies were put on steroids during the Biden administration. These are easy fixes in reconciliation to get rid of things like this that was happening in HHS. It's absurd for Republicans not to push harder. And as I've said many times, the weak part of the Trump agenda is Republicans in Congress.
Wow. Let's go to another clip here. This one is Marco Rubio talking about how the Biden administration was naming certain people as disinformation people. Watch this.
Something else we got out of the business of wasn't widely reported, or maybe it was. We had an office in the Department of State whose job it was to censor Americans. And by the way, I'm not going to say who it is. I'll leave it up to them. There's at least one person at this table today who had a dossier in that building of social media posts to identify them as purveyors of disinformation. We have these dossiers. We are going to be turning those over to these individuals.
Me or Elon? We can follow up with the media story.
Well, we are going to turn over these dossiers to the individuals, and they'll decide whether they want to disclose it or not. But just think about it. The Department of State of the United States had set up an office to monitor the social media posts and commentary of American citizens to identify them as vectors of disinformation, when we know that the best way to combat disinformation is freedom of speech and transparency.
I mean, we were this kind of third world dictator stuff that goes on that they're uncovering and talking about now freely. And it used to be interesting. There was a time, you remember it, when one administration didn't say much about the last administration or the previous administration. They all played the game, the uniparty. And how well has that worked out for us, right? And now the curtain's being pulled back, and the American people are finding out just how wicked the last administration was. But you would have never seen a George W. Bush administration doing this. Never.
No, probably not, I guess. But listen, I'm no fan of the George Bush administration, I have to tell you. But back to this point, 18 U.S.C. 242, that's right there in the federal code, makes it illegal with both civil and criminal penalties, including up to 2 years in prison, for any federal employee to abrogate the civil rights of American citizens.
Wow.
And there are people who need to be indicted by the Department of Justice. They need to, all the data is there, all the documentation's there. Most of it's in the public sphere when it comes to the Facebook files and the Twitter files. And what these government actors were doing needs to have a criminal at worst and a civil at best for them, penalty to it. We have to stop this now because it's the only manner in which these actors can shut down American citizens. Democrats are fighting for this. This is one of the reasons they're going after this absurd notion of trying to get this Abrego Garcia guy back from El Salvador, that HHS was helping the trafficking, of sex trafficking of young women. I mean, it's absurd what these people were doing. They were hiding all the bad things they were doing and doing much worse things to hide the already bad things. You know that a lie doesn't stop where it's at. It expands upon itself as long as you keep lying. So we need people perp walked out of their houses for having undertaken this censorship effort here in the United States. It's illegal. It is unconstitutional. And there needs to be a penalty, a severe penalty, as severe as possible for every one of these people that did this.
Well said. Here's a longer clip from J.D. Vance. A lot of people are posting this on social media today. Here we go.
Mr. President, thank you, and thanks to the cabinet. So at the risk of insulting everybody else at the table, I believe that I am the youngest member sitting at the table. And, it occurred to me that from the time that I was born to the time that Donald J. Trump was inaugurated just a few months ago, we went from, again, 40 years, we went from the world's manufacturing superpower to one in which we depend on the People's Republic of China to make the things that we need. We went from the proudest military in the world to one in which we failed to meet our recruiting goals. And we went from one in which bipartisan border policy was the consensus of both Democrats and Republicans to one in which we allowed 20 million people to run roughshod illegally over the countryside, causing crime, causing a stress in the welfare system. And again, that happened over the lifetime of the youngest member of the cabinet. And what has happened in 100 days is that we've started to reverse every single one of those negative trends. And I think what it shows to me is that the president, and you sit in the Oval Office and you see these portraits of presidents past. And let's be honest, most of them have been placeholders. They've been people who have allowed their staff to sign executive orders with an auto pen instead of men of action. And the reason the media attacks this administration as chaotic is because the president is solving the problems the American people set about to solve. He's actually doing the things that he promised that he would do. And Mr. President, it's been an honor to be part of it for the past 100 days. And let me just make one other observation, because it's interesting. I've seen the data, I've monitored it, I've looked at it, but the most underreported fact of the first 100 days is that we came in with a massive recruitment shortfall. And in 100 days of Secretary Hegseth and President Trump's leadership, we now have people breaking down the doors to join our military. To the media assembled here, it's a really interesting question. Why has that happened? Completely aside from the fact that I think it's a good thing, or I think that President Trump deserves political credit for it, why did we go from a military where people didn't want to serve to now all of a sudden they do want to serve? That's a story you guys should cover. But compared to that, how much time have you instead focused on the fact that we deported an MS-13 gang member with a valid deportation order? And why is it that the press is so focused on the fake BS rather than what's really going on in the country? I think that what we've shown, sir, is that you can do a lot. You can do a lot in 100 days, but you've also unfortunately revealed that too much of the American media hasn't learned the lessons of the past 40 years. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thoughts, Jim?
It will be very interesting and fun, frankly, if this guy will run for president in 4 years, just to see how that all plays out. But of course, no one's going to match Donald Trump. And that's really the message here. Donald Trump's leadership does matter. It does bring about actually good results. And if we will only stand up for this guy. And by the way, be critical. There are going to be things, mistakes he makes, and even I'm going to not like, and I'll probably have to say something about. But the reality is that overall, we've not had a presidency like this. I can't remember when, but should say this. We did have a presidency like this during FDR's administration, but that was the radical breakdown of the Republican constitutional order. We are not a constitutional republic anymore, beginning really with Wilson, but in earnest with FDR. We are on the back end of a more than 100-year progressive movement that has sought to destroy the American Constitution and to destroy the concept of America in general here in these latter decades, to literally rewrite the actual history of this country. Donald Trump and all the chaos that you see is because that order needs to stop. There are a lot of people saying he's going against norms. Let's get rid of all the norms, please, because I don't think hardly any of them matter anymore. They need to go away, and it takes a chaotic effort to get that done, but it must be done. And Donald Trump is almost divinely inspired and put in place to get this done. And I don't believe in worship of Donald Trump. I'm worshiping the God that divinely just might have helped us get out of some of this mess and maybe have a chance to get away from it forever.
My friend Michael Reagan put out today, Trump's having a cabinet meeting and only Fox is covering the live broadcast. Legacy media should be embarrassed, but they're not, because they're full of hate for Donald Trump, for Trump. Well, he's right. They should be carrying it. A 2-hour cabinet meeting where you have members of his administration, the secretaries of the different agencies, giving a report card, giving an update to the chief executive, who the American people overwhelmingly elected. And we need to have people involved again in civics. We need to have people involved again in hearing how the country's running, what's going on, and become informed. And I just wish more Americans were as interested in the governing of our local, state, and federal governments as they are Bachelor, Bachelorette, Dancing with the Stars, and football, and sports, and NBA. Because this is far more important to our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. And as you said, we're not a constitutional republic anymore. We've got to restore the republic if we can, but we're on a very small window here. We're on a razor's edge, and there's an election coming up in less, 18 months, and a lot can happen in that 18 months. And we could see a lot of this progress stop, and we could see Donald Trump being impeached, and a lot of energy and time being wasted in restoring the republic. And that's what these people want to do. They're telling you they want to do that.
$250 million of net worth later, people like Nancy Pelosi don't want this game to change. They really don't. It's working for them. I mean, in a very corrupt fashion, obviously, but it's working. There are even some Republicans that like this system. And that 29 of them, apparently, who voted against Rand Paul's amendment on an earlier bill this year, on the CR that we passed earlier this year, to $1.5 trillion cuts in our spending after this massive wave election that was all about cutting government.